hallgatóknak is. We are going to start in a minute by showing some films, and then we start the discussion. Can you all hear us? Raise your hand if you can hear us on Zoom. Fantastic. Yes, Mr. Malone? Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Do we have anyone with us? Yes, thank you, sir. Where are all the others? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good. That's already My name is Dania Ferko. I'm a historian and journalist, and I have the honor today to be the host of today's conference. Here from Budapest, we welcome all participants, but thanks to technology, it has become quite relative where we are in this COVID virus season. In the beginning, at the initiative of Hungarian and Polish people, the EuCET, which is the European Civil Cooperation Council, was formed, which is provided a thought which has proved that the only feasible way is to have a association alliance of free nations, all for the Christian Europe. And this was very concisely put by Count István Széchenyi, who said, "Nothing about us without us." Let me just read the closing remarks, the closing testament of EuCET. Intellectual patriots from the European countries participating in the conference means that by strengthening the international premise of EuCET, we believe that the reform of the European Union, as envisioned by the intellectual predecessors of Christian democracy, including Adenauer and Schuman, is especially timely, just as putting the direction of community integration back in track and its historical and cultural identity. It has become strongly compromised. We believe that Europe needs a strengthening of Christian culture and cultural identity as one of the most important bases for modern European organization, now more than ever, to protect the Christian ideology that has developed over the course of the century. We want a strong Europe where the general political positions of the European Council as the forum of national heads of state and government cannot be superseded by lower-level council decisions, and where the European Parliament is involved in the interinstitutional consultations regarding such decision. We also consider it important to rethink and strengthen the institution of the European Citizens' Initiative, a step taken in the right direction. All this because we believe in the principle of the sovereignty of the people, on the basis of which the source of law and its exercises are the people as a whole, which exercising the rights in connection with the state, either directly or via its representatives, which has become a fundamental element of all modern European constitutions. We consider it important to validate the idea of national sovereignty, which we feel means the independence of the national states that make up the European Union, as well as their international legal capacity and their capacity to act on the principle of the sovereign equality of the states. EuCET would like to use the strengthening of moral foundation to return the EU to its original ideas of its founders and the prominent politicians that have formed the community over the past decades. We believe that in the Europe envisioned by Helmut Kohl, the Commission and all other Union institutions have to proceed not only in line with the specific provisions of the treaties pertaining to legislative acts, but should also take their spirit into account when preparing individual decisions. This assumes a feeling of responsibility for the future of coming generations, to prevention of harmful federalist and even super-federalist endeavors, a representation of civil self-protection, the union of individuals and community civilian will, and the protection of European nations. The important platform currently being established, the European Civil Cooperation Council, serves all of the above. So once again, good evening at the online conference to all the participants of EuCET, and with distinguished respect, I would like to welcome all the Spiritual Defense Force listeners who follow in the online world. It will be worthwhile to keep up with us through Zoom. Today's conference, figuratively speaking, we have people from Poland, France, Finland, Germany, Italy, Sweden, also from Transylvania and Romania we have guest presenters. I'd like to just say in advance that we wish to have an edited version and to publish this by the end of the year. Now, we announced the topics of the conference as in 3 different topics. On the one hand, we believe that we need to have an urging of the extension of the network of EuCET. And we would like to receive your recommendations, all the speakers, to make recommendations about the future institutional structure of the EU in order to include that the more detailed elaboration of the concept of Alliance of Free Nations. And the third task is no less than the first 2, is we have to discover how we could participate in the consultation regarding the future of the European Union. So we are expecting the recommendations and framework of solutions of the conference. Now, the language of the conference is English. Each presenter has 10 minutes, and we would like to stress and ask again to keep the time frame. We don't want to be policing the conference, but I can promise that I will be very watchful. Now, getting on to our first topic, we have to ask the question, is there such a thing as a historical canon? Because the traditions, the legacies of Christian culture, personal freedom, the freedom of the nation, and attachment to democracy, respect of human rights are all part of the canon. But this canon does not stop at the boundaries of Europe, but it has an effect on the new world, the United States, Canada, and Australia as well. I would now like to respectfully ask TÜV-TÜKA's president, Dr. Laszlo Csizmadia, to give his welcome speech. So the floor is yours, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the participants of the European Union Civil Cooperation Council video conference and all those friends who connect to us. So, my friends, the sovereignty of the people is unavoidable. So, if the institutional system of the European Union needs to be reformed, there needs to be bottoms up, a grassroots initiative. So the unsuitability of Brusselite elite cannot be just watched. We can't just stand by doing nothing. That is why I'd like to give a special welcome to UGL, the Italian General Workers' Council's representative, and the representative of the Hungarian Workers' Council National Assembly president. Now, in 2019, at the first symposium, we adopted the closing statement, and it was our plan that this year in Warsaw, we will actually elect the panel. But unfortunately, the COVID virus epidemic prevented us from doing that. So therefore, we can only do that next year. In 2011, together with our Polish civilian friends, we determined to found the Civil Cooperation Council, CET in Hungarian in short. And we thought that there would be a closer cooperation, and we are not disappointed. This is just what happened. And now our founding principles have not changed, but the vital issues that affect our nations are getting more and more, civilian communities joined us as partners. So therefore, the multitude of civilians have become the spiritual defense force. And also we recognize that in order to control politics, we really need to have a guideline which we published in a book format, and that is accessible through EuCET's website. Now, we will further elaborate on our disciplines. Today, we see that in the institutional system of the European Union, there is an unhealthy spread of the ideological ideas of certain parties. And therefore, instead of having equal rights of nations and having an alliance of these nations, there is a party fight. We have a lot of new invaders illegally coming from the Middle East and Africa, and the priorities of the economic life of Europe is now shifted towards the new open society colonization endeavors. And there is an aim of creating the European United Nations. These two forces are against each other. So the institutional system of the Union uses double standards more and more. The countries which are against this ultra-liberal European parliamentary and European Commission ideas can expect unfounded attacks. So very often the legitimate Hungarian and Polish governments are being attacked by some of these lobby interests. We who believe in the Judeo-Christian civilization and its strong force that maintains us, we believe and we consider that this is not the way to the future. So the system of rules which is unlawful as prevalent in the initiatives of the European civil reforms needs to be changed. The institutional structure is already obsolete and there needs to be a reform. So we can only become winners in this economic competition if we have in the forefront the economic primate just the same as the founding fathers did. In the current cycle of the EU, we need to further review and change the basic rules. Sovereignty, subsidiarity should not be overwritten without consensus. So, my friends, the taxes of the European citizens cannot serve in the European Parliament or in the European Commission different parties' ideologies and a battleground for these ideologies. The battleground for the parties is in the different states. So our European civilization is based on Judeo-Christian ideas and notions, and this is our primary task to preserve this. We have to stop illegal migration. We have to protect the boundaries of Europe. This is our common issue and our common aim. And it's unavoidable. So the aim of today's conference is to be even more precise about our basic principles, and that's why we are so happy to have Christian right-wing trade unions who joined us, UGC, as well as the National Association of Hungarian Workers' Council. So their presence is very important for us. So let us be led by our endeavors for achieving public good and the future of Europe and our countries above all. So let me finish by saying nothing about us without us.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the welcoming thoughts and for the presentation. We Hungarians are obliged by the legacy of our first king, Saint Stephen, which means that it is very important to maintain our national identity, and it is equally important that we are Christian. This is the foundation of our identity. This is also the political credo of the current Hungarian government, and we are connected in souls with our Polish friends in these beliefs because they believe the same things. It is not, therefore, by chance that over the past 1,000 years we have fought several freedom fights together with our Polish friends. I would like to invite Mr. Tomasz Sakiewicz from Poland, who is the editor-in-chief of Gazeta Polska, to give his presentation and to talk also on behalf of the 400 Polish Club. Mr. Editor-in-Chief, the floor is yours. I'm sorry, you will have to unmute your microphone. Thank you. Thank you.
Now it's about 500 clubs of readers in whole Europe, also in Budapest. But we have now clubs, of course, in the United States, and they are very important participant of American election. And we have very important information from this place. But concentrating on our subject, what our duties because of European Union, because of new project of Europe, which we see now realizing by European governments. I think that we can be shocked, but we must protect the same values which can say every part is left and right, but this meaning can be completely different. I think that now our duty is to protect democracy, tolerance, and equality. But what does it mean? Now there is a tendency not to agree with democratic decision. For example, Polish people choose in last 8 election, conservative government, conservative president, and conservative parliaments. And European Union has a problem to accept it. Of course, they accept that they are government, that's our president, but they can't accept it that we can make our rules, that we can make our decision, how our country can be created, how people can decide about his lives, and they know better. But why? Where is the point of decision if it's not a democracy? They say European card, but what they have the law to decide under our democracy? Where is this level of decision who allowed them to decide that our decision is better than our democracy? They say, of course, we have democracy, but liberal democracy. It looks nice, but it's real dangerous. What does it mean? Polish people, Hungarian people remember when during communist time was socialist democracy. The government from Moscow explained us that we have also democracy, but it's a socialist democracy. What does it mean? That you can choose parliament, you can decide about everything, but your decision is not important. because the point of decision, the source of decision is in Moscow. Now they are trying to explain that liberal democracy means that there is a source of decision in different place that people are living and they are deciding during election. And where is this place of decision? There are this source of decision about how our democracy should look. We don't know. Maybe you know, but we don't know. Who can give us the rules of our democracy? Who create these rules? Of course, there is a real problem which is very well known by every creators of democracy, philosophers of democracy, that the democratic decision is not all. There are rules under the democracy. It's human rights. Of course, we can accept it. But what are the source of human rights? For us, it's a Christian source. We are basing this decision on Christian philosophy, that people has his own dignity, people has a lot to be life, and people has natural rights, and they can't accept it. They decided there are the other philosophy, the other rules which should be accepted. What are the rules? The most dangerous is not the other rules, the other philosophy, but the most dangerous is that we don't know who decide and who can change it. Why? Where the source of this decision? They explain us that the source are in old European country, but why? And if why one country has better source of values, European values, than our values? Our fighting for democracy in the European Union is to find clear rules for every nation, that our rules are the same important, like in German rules, like France, like Spain or Italy or Hungary. It's first. The second, the tolerance. The tolerance is the idea which is very strongly promoted by left movements. But we have real problem with tolerance. Now we see in Poland, like a left movement activist attacks Christian people, priest, old people who are praying in the church, and it's acceptable for European Union governments. How to manage when opposite, when any Christian people will attack any left activist? How loudly will be to start cry? But in 1 week in Poland, a few hundred people has been attacked by left movement activists, and nobody is shocked. Everything is all right in Europe. They stop now, but we have a real problem with tolerance. And it's not problem of Christian, it's problem of new project of European Union. They can't tolerance traditional values, traditional people, traditional family. And they believe that we have less possibility to move in our country in the European Union. Why? And equality. I think that the problem of the same rules touch every country. We have real game when stronger countries are trying to explain how we should build our business, and they are trying to earn money because they are stronger, they are more power, they have more possibility to stop money. But it's completely opposite to European values. And we are in a situation then we can start to protect, to promote, to defeat European values, which are very traditional for European Union. But because in this new project, which are promoting, there is no place for democracy. There is no place for tolerance. There is no place for equality. They changed it in the last years, and a new idea, they means liberal democracy. What does it mean? It doesn't mean democracy. It doesn't mean tolerance. It doesn't mean equality. But we don't know what it should be. We know only that it's very left, very authoritarian, and very connected with censorship. Censorship, now it's a real problem in a lot of spheres in European Union. Not only European Union, but we have problem in Facebook, on Twitter. If you are conservative, you have a real problem with censorship. Real, I know it. If you are conservative, you can be ashamed, you can be stopped, you can be completely shut up because of your point of view. We must start to fight for freedom, for real freedom, because the European Union now is changing in a project who is intolerance, without freedom, without tolerance. And what's very good in this fighting, because these ideas is very strongly connected with every fathers of Europe, every politics who create the European Union. We must use these ideas to protect our ideas. And we must explain that it's very conservative. It's very Christian. And it's very good for our nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mr. Sakiewicz for the valuable thoughts. Currently, the leadership of the European Union is talking about a vision that is about a federal Europe, about the United States of Europe. This is their vision, and this vision lacks national sovereignty. But when they talk about this, we have to ask the question, what could be the foundation, the identity-based foundation for such a Europe? We see that there are nation states in Europe, and there the foundation for the identity are the common language, the shared history, the shared culture, shared traditions, shared values, and we see that that works. But what would be the identity-related foundation for such a federal United States of Europe? I would like to ask Mr. Károly Lorant, economist, to give his speech. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I am the main organizer of this video conference today. But when I look around in this room, I have to be more modest. I have to say I'm one of the main organizers, but you certainly received letters from me, emails from me on organizing this conference. And obviously in the future we will stay in touch as well. I will talk about this later on. So I am an economist by profession, and in the 2000s I worked in the European Parliament in the group named Identity and Democracy. And my main activity there was to step up against a centralized European Union and to find alternatives. And the leader of this group was Jan Petters Blonde, a Danish representative. The group, by the way, still exists. It is called Identity and Democracy. So they changed independence to identity in their name. But what I would like to talk about is that back in those days, we thought a lot about how could we do things differently and why we cannot implement what the leadership of the European Union is forcing on us, a federal European state. And I would like to just outline a couple of obstacles to this federalization. First of all, it is the lack of a common language. If anybody had the chance to attend a meeting in the European Parliament or even the canteen in the European Commission, you will immediately hear that it's sort of a biblical Babel situation where everybody speaks a different language. So yes, English could be an alternative. It could be a common language, but it would not be like in the United States or in India. One of the problems is that although we do speak English, the level at which we speak it is not good enough. It's okay for an everyday communication, but we couldn't really understand political standpoints of politicians, for example. So one of the main obstacles or fundamental obstacles is the lack of a common language. There's not much to change this. We could, of course, learn English at a higher level, but that would not change the fact that we are nation states and that we live in our own language. In Hungarian, we say that the nation lives in its language. The second obstacle is the lack of a shared history. If you look back to the past 1,000 years, then we can see that the European nations were in fight against each other. They were at war with each other. And events that for one nation were glorious victory were a sad occasion and a loss to other nations. So obviously there is no shared historical background which would serve as a foundation for a United States. But at the same time, we are all Europeans. There is a shared European culture which people want to give up in Western Europe and which we here in Eastern Europe fight for. And this is what connects us. And this is what we can build a future cooperation of. Not a nation, not a United States of Europe, but a cooperation. The next thing I see as an obstacle is that the leadership of Europe always says that we should have a shared foreign policy, that we should speak the same language. However, the foreign political interests of nations in Europe have very different interests. For example, countries that are close to Russia have very different interests than others that are at the Atlantic Sea, at the shores of the Atlantic Sea. But at the same time, I still believe that if we were to look at the fundamental national interests, we would surely find common ground for a shared defense policy and foreign policy. But I didn't see any steps forward in this regard. The next issue that is related with the previous points is the issue of national identity. For someone to be American, obviously the US is a migration country. So for someone to become American, they have to become American. They have to feel American. India, the same. German, federal states, it's the same. We cannot say this, however, about Europe. There was a survey conducted by Eurobarometer in Europe, and they looked at what is the foundation of a European identity. And what came out of it is that 80% of the Europeans say that they are primarily a member of their own nation, and only 20% who first say that they are European. So we are nation states, but we still have to cooperate in a manner because we are Europeans. The next obstacle is the common budget. A federal state that people want to turn the European Union into, well, a federal state should have a common budget of 15 to 20% of the GDP. Currently, this only amounts to 1% in European Union. So there was another survey that looked at how willing how much people were willing to give up from their GDPs for the common budget, and the outcome was 2 to 3%. And now, if that's the case, then that is our foundation. This is where we have to start off from, and that will, of course, have consequences. For example, that the inner trade of the European Union has to be equalized, somehow balanced. For example, having introduced a euro without having looked at the necessary requirements should not have happened, and this is something we have to step up against. There was actually 3 reports being done in the 70s. The most important one of them was the McDowell report, which looked at the issue of the budget, how much we would have to pay into the common budget to have an equilibrium within the European Union. And according to this report, it should be 7 to 8%, but we do not have the necessary requirements for that. So what do we have as a framework? Well, now we have a framework for a cooperation of nation states. I would like to refer to de Gaulle. In the 60s, de Gaulle dreamed up a concept which was then elaborated by Fouché in the so-called Fouché plan. And I believe that our movement and the task of our movement would be to better elaborate these de Gaulle ideas, the economic background, the legal framework, the foreign policy related framework. None of this was elaborated by Fouché back then, because it's quite a draft of a plan. But I think this is our plan for the coming years. This is our task for the coming years. And I think we could bring together supporters much more than we have now. And finally, I would like to say that we would like to make a publishment on our ideas and our speeches and reports. And I would like to urge you all later on to give us your thoughts in 15 to 20 pages so that we can sum it up in one publishment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Mr. Károly Loránd for his presentation, and I think you will not be offended if he harasses you in order for this publication to be done. As Mr. Loránd mentioned, there was already an idea of de Gaulle in the beginning of the 1960s about the idea of federalism, which was embedded in the Fouché plan. They mentioned that France would have too much of a national influence within the European Union. But the person who can tell us even more and more interestingly is Dr. Henri Mallos, the honorary president of VOCO Europe, and also the former president of the European Union's European Social and Economic Commission. So I'd like to ask him to come to the floor and give his presentation.
Thank you very much, and hello everybody, hello to friends in Budapest and Warsaw and other places. Yes, I just noticed that you mentioned France and General de Gaulle and the Fouché plan. I would just like to congratulate the disappeared Dr. Laurent for his excellent paper, very well documented. And in fact, you could have these days the illusion that France could have changed its position toward the European Union because our new and young president takes sometimes very I would say, federalist position. But in fact, my belief is that this is due to his lack of experience and lack of real knowledge about what the European Union is today, because it's not the global sentiment among the French population. And of course, we all want Europe. We all feel all Europeans, and we are all very proud of what was achieved. But as Dr. Laurent explained, we were very proud of what the European Union achieved in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And then suddenly the European Union has changed. It become, as I was said, ultra-liberal, bureaucratic body with some authoritarian, centralized tendency, which are totally, I would say, in contradiction with the goals and the aim of founder fathers. You present me as actual and honorary chairman of the Vocal Europe, which is European think tank. And I was a member of the European institution for long years. I've been in Brussels for almost 40 years, so I have long experience. And I can really say that there has been a radical change, end of the 80s, mid of the 90s, difficult to judge exactly when the European Union has moved to the European community, and I like very much this concept of community. Community is a Christian concept, in fact. And when we move from community to union, we have lost, I think, the values and the spirit. And if you see the situation of today, you can see that the European Union has lost confidence among the citizens, not just in Poland and Hungary, but I would say, fortunately, also in our countries. For example, in my country, in France, globally, 70%, 75%, if you look at the Eurobarometer polls, of the population still believe in Europe, but just less than 20% trust the actual European Union and its institutions. So this is due to the bureaucratization, this is due to the centralization, and this is due also to a lack of democracy. And I can give you some concrete example. I've been president of the European institution, not the biggest one, but institution with 140 million euros budget a year, with 750 staff members. And I can say that it's impossible in the actual situation to reform the European Union as it is. I tried my modest institution, my modest function to install a wind of change in this European Economic and Social Committee to make it more active, more visible, more influence in the name of the civil society, in the name of you, in the name of the citizen, to change the European Union to be more human, more close to the citizens, more close to the real problems. But the administration is there, and the administration which decide everything. And you, even as president, member of parliament, as politician, you have experience, and so with commissioners, you are just for a short time. Administration is there forever. And this bureaucratization of the European Union makes the things very, very complicated. Today, we have a feeling that the European Union is divided. It's divided, not a feeling, it's a reality. It's divided in, I would say, four blocks of countries. You have on one side, already one was left, is Great Britain, UK. UK was fond of Europe for free trade, step to the globalization, but in the same times, they could survive with the project of the founder fathers. We could survive with the community as it was until the 90s. But now with this super centralization, with an attempt to interfere in the daily life of the citizens, the UK citizens have decided to leave. And you saw how difficult it was for them to leave. All the obstacles were put by the European administration to make this this divorce, this left of the European Union impossible. Seems that Brussels want to punish the British citizens because they wanted to leave. I think it's a real right, it should be the right of any nation. If you have a union of free nations, each nation should have a right at a certain stage to leave, because it's the decision of a citizen, if it's the decision of a citizens. We have today an opportunity, and I really congratulate the European Union Council of Civil Society, EuCET, congratulate you to tackle this issue of the future of Europe. We have this conference of the future of Europe in the next weeks. Due to the coronavirus, it has been postponed, but it should start with the next presidency, Portuguese presidency, that we hope in February, March. And of course, the goal of the inspirators of this conference, Mr. Macron, was not really the one to go on the way of a union of free nations, but it's an excellent platform, excellent opportunities for all and for us to build on a new way, a new proposals for the future of Europe, which should be not the one of a federalist. Because we see, and Dr. Laurent explained it very clearly, that it has no perspective. Not the centralism one destroying the identity and not respecting the European values. Of course not. And we saw that the ultraliberal way, of the British has already gone and left the European project. I would just mention this division of Europe in four. So the UK has left. We have a country of the south who suffer a lot and want more European solidarity. You have the country of the north who had better wealth, survived better the pandemic. And you have your countries, Central and Eastern Europe, which are hurted by the centralization, by the attacks, were mentioned very rightly by our Polish colleague. I totally support him, totally support. I cannot understand why bureaucrats from Brussels can decide from Brussels what is right and what is wrong in the development of a society of one country. It's not their matter. Their matter is to strengthen the cooperation among us, not to interfere in our daily life. I think in this conference of the future of Europe, there is three main topics, which is important in my view to work on. If you look at the program of this conference, these topics are not really presented because they put in the agenda of this conference everything which is the idea to do more Europe and more European integration. But in this conference agenda, there's also a point where we say it's open to any other topic. So it's really possible to put, if we have a broad, and I will come back at the end of my intervention, if we have a broad support to bring these ideas, and we will accept or not, but in the fact to present for the public audience, for the public opinion, European public opinion, a new alternative for the future of Europe. The first item is, you mentioned that, and Dr. Chemade mentioned that very clearly, these other values, the European values. Today, we have switched from European values, the values of the founder fathers, to global world values. And the European values have disappeared. As you mentioned, the Christian roots of Europe have disappeared. Our history, our common identity, what has made the European civilization, our cultures coming from ancient Greek to the modern time, This has disappeared and are replaced by, I will say, globalized values. And we have to come back to truly European values, where, as mentioned, all the European citizens, majority of them, should recognize themselves. And this has to be done, and I will be very happy to work with you on that, because this is, it was very clearly expressed by Dr. Laurent previously. The second point, the second main topic is the topic of subsidiarity. What the European Union should do, what the European Union should not do, what should be left at national level or sometimes local level. And today we have a total mix where we say that the European Union is interfering in the daily life about the way the farmers are making their work, the way we produce mineral water or whatever. But we are not concentrate on main issues where we could be stronger together. We saw during the epidemic, during the crisis, but concerning health, the fact that to have reserve of medicaments, the fact to have task force to be able to act very quickly in urgency matters, we were totally, the European Union totally disappeared. The European was absent. When Italy, and I'm happy that there is an Italian colleague there, the first to intervene to support Italians were the Chinese, the Cuban, the Russians and others, but not Brussels, because Brussels is not there where the citizens need them to be. So we have really to redefine the role and the topics. In my view, the question of environment, the question of security toward the Islamic terror, which is threatening us, you see, these days, from France, from Nice, Paris to Vienna. But this Islamic terror is really, there is really an aggression against the European values and against Europe. There is a threat of a religious war against the Christianity, and we have to be ready for that. What is the European Union doing for that? These are really the issues that the European Union should tackle. And the third topic is, of course, the governance. And today, when we see the governance of the European Union, we see really there is no democracy. There is no real power for the member states, because with this vote with the majority system, one small countries can be left over, and their voice cannot be listened. I will just remind that at the beginning of the European Union, each country, whichever was its size, has its place and has the possibility to be listened. Today, it's not possible. We have majorities, it's moving, the European Commission is manipulating. The European Commission also, with the legislation concerning the single market, I will just warn you on something, has the capacity with what they call delegate act to interfere in our daily life without any control. We had this year, 2020, the Council adopted a regulation which is called taxonomy. It doesn't mean nothing for anybody, but that has very, very important consequence. This means that for the so-called Green Deal, and we are all ecologists, we all recognize this necessity. But yes, but for this perspective, the European Commission has the possibility to act about to decide which activity is sustainable, which is not, interfere to the level of a small business, of a handicraft, without any control. It's the Commission, the bureaucrats of Brussels will decide. So we have really to change the governance, to reinforce the European Parliament, to reinforce the decision of the Council, to limit the Commission to a very executive but under political control, and to give more space for citizens' initiative and for the weight of citizens, of civil society organizations. My last word will be that this conference for the future of Europe presents for us, offers for us, for EuCET and for others who want this this union of free nations, to present a more elaborate platform. Because this other option, this kind of option of a confederation based on real European Christian values, with a better governance, this option has for the time not be enough developed, not be enough structured. And without, I just finished, without a real radical change, European Union will go to its death. So we are the only one, this option is the only one which is possible, which is able to save Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Melos, for the valuable thoughts. And you mentioned very important issues, very important problems. So let's move on. And the European Union, currently there are about 60 different minority groups and many regional languages spoken by about 40 to 45 million people, Basque, Catalan, Frisian, etc. Welsh, but the European Union does not provide any assistance for the protection of these languages. And this is not the only problem, this insensitivity. So I'd like to now ask Dr. Zoltán Lomnici, Jr., who is a constitutionalist and also the spokesman of TÜV Türkei, and like to also draw the attention to all the speakers to keep to the 10-minute limit. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Lomnici, the floor is yours. Waiting for Mr. Lomnici to join us. Now, about Brussels' unlawful actions and about the decisions and the room to maneuver for the member states is my topic for today's conference. And it is really obvious that in respect of this topic, we have to review of how the European Union's decision-making process is done and whether the sovereignty of the member states and room to maneuver is still established by the member states. Now, our constitution states that Hungary exercises certain rights together with the European Union. So, for instance, the budget for 2021-27, and we all know of the debates which go in the direction, or at least they're trying to push us in the direction of having, instead of unanimity, to have a qualified majority decision in the new Europe by the newly elected member countries, or the new member countries or smaller member countries, to have be pushed in the background. So our civilian organization has put forward many different recommendations which would solve the problems which currently are not only about restriction of the room to maneuver, but also the initiatives for legislation of the citizens of Europe could be more efficient. Now, this renewal could be could include the ombudsman, European ombudsman, and also the ability to go directly to the European Court of Justice in respect of different legal disadvantages that they suffer. So the renewal of institutions initiative is continuously happening with the assistance of civil cooperation. Now, a symbol of going against Brussels was the initiative of asking the question whether people want to be in a community where there is an absolution, they get commands, and any requests from the member countries are not accepted. David Cameron brought the attention to this before the referendum, which should have been considered. These were not considered. And then the outcome, Brexit, took place. So they said goodbye to the European Union. We also have to know that the constitutional courts could have a very important role. Now, András Varga, previous constitutionalist, I want to refer to. So there was a parallel explanation that obviously none of the member states have given up their sovereignty, and there are certain limitations to joint exercising of legal rights. So only in 2 cases can the European Union say that a decision cannot be implemented directly in having an effect in a member state. So if it's an indirect effect in a member state, so that's a secondary effect, with the exceptions where an amendment to a basic ruling, for instance, in Ireland, we mentioned that the European Constitution was not successful is because the communities did not enforce this via referendum. What can they do? What can the constitutional courts do? The ultra vires is when the European Union goes beyond its mandate. So a constitutional court can say that that it cannot be implemented, or if it's against a member state's act or legislation. So we have to also mention that the Solange 1 and Solange 2 decisions of the German Constitutional Court go directly against the European Court's decisions and the European Court's verdicts, such as the Costa NL decision or Van der Loos, where the Luxembourg Court said that the union legislation having a primate or primary effect, but the German Constitution Court did not confirm this primacy, such as in a case of a central bank which would finance the Mediterranean countries from a secondary source. And the Constitutional Court, the German Constitutional Court, said that these decisions cannot take effect, and this European legal practice cannot be implemented in Germany if it does not change its rulings. And knowing the European Central Bank's decision was adopted by the European Court of Justice by buying shares directly. Now, in France, the Conseil d'État and also the Italian and the Polish Constitutional Court confirmed this practice. The Hungarian Constitutional Court has not gone directly against the European Court of Justice, but we cannot exclude this happening in the future. We also have to state that the acquis communautaire's adoption and the legal harmonization at the time of accession in 2004. So the norms which are made now are more politicized and more divisive than the previous rulings. So I'm thinking about the temporary mandatory quota about migration and other similar suggestions. So it's by common language called the despotism or the tyranny of the European Union. So we have to say that the union's decisions are not in line with the basic treaties, but are going in the direction of breaking integration. And finally, I have to also say what sort of perspectives do the member states in the respect of room to maneuver. It is quite obvious that it's not only through the constitutional courts, but similar to the British Prime Minister's suggestion, the red card. Now there is a yellow card, which is not really suitable for making these suggestions invalid. But it would be more than an indication. It would be like a barrier towards the European Union, which would mean that the member states do not have to implement what the European Union says. Now, Denmark is an exception, and we cannot exclude that this kind of opt-out can be exercised. Now, I'd like to bring the attention to the spiral effect of more Euro principle trend, which is in the European Union today, not only for exercising joint legislation or joint rulings in respect of foreign policy, for instance, or taxation, but for instance, in it wants to control the justice system as well by having the European Common Attorney's Department. So the spiral effect would be exercised here as well. So we can conclude quite obviously, if there was a European Attorney's Department, then there would be a situation whereby the member states would not be able to initiate cases, but the European prosecutors or attorney's office would have, or the courts would have, the right to initiate cases against European citizens. So these procedures would be done. So in summary, we can say that currently the federalist versus sovereign debate has not been decided yet. Now it seems to be a primacy of the former. Within the European Parliament, the communities are in more numerous numbers who want to have a federalist Europe. And perhaps we can still save the Fouché plan, de Gaulle's ideas, and go against the Spark plan, which today is represented by President Macron or Angela Merkel. So in order for issues to be decided not on the banks of the Spree or the Seine, and according to Spiegel, the kind of under-the-table democracy, we need to have the European Council to preserve its integrity and to have the unanimous vote within the Council. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we will ask for half a minute of your patience. Of you know the song Avanti ragazzi di Buddha, which means come on boys from Buddha. On the 10th anniversary of the 1956 events, an Italian journalist wrote this song and the lyrics to it. And not so long ago, the right-wing Lega party proposed a draft law, namely that Avanti ragazzi di Buddha should become a national song for Italy following its national anthem. As we know, Italy is being hit hard by migration, and Salvini's Lega is trying to make sure that this song represents the possibility of regaining freedom from intruders. Obviously, the government is on a different opinion. They would like to have a partisan song as a national song. But now we have the excellent opportunity to ask Mr. Augusto Cocchioni, who represents EuGL and the International Relations Department in Hungary. So the floor is yours, Mr. Cocchioni. Please unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Augusto Cocchioni. I represent the EuGL, the General Union of Labor in Hungary. Really, thank you very much for the invitation to this very important, interesting conference. I've been listening with great interest all the speeches done till now. And for the occasion, I bring the best greetings from Gianluigi Ferretti, which actually is the responsible for international relations of our union, and is the person who presented the law in the parliament, a design of law, so that the song Ragazzi di Buddha, which has been just now named, would be introduced as a song in Italy representing the democratic and freedom value. Unfortunately, Gianluigi, we should have attended together to this very interesting conference, but first he had another important institutional commitment. I could not participate, but unfortunately, it's not very good news at the moment. And he got healed with COVID, which now he's feeling better. But anyways, it's a little unpleasant. So he sent his greetings, and I will present our union. So the EuGL, the General Union of Labor, is one of the major trade union confederation in Italy, with around 2 million members. We are an atypical union, having been the only right union in Italy and probably in the world. With 70, we have been set up 70 years. We had the celebration of the 70 years foundation at the beginning of this year. The EuGL proposes the definite overcoming of the political conception of social class and all these ideological consequences through the co-responsibility of workers in the business choice. Since the foundation, the EuGL has always brought the demands of work in politics, never forgetting the needs of workers, but considering that these are not in contrast with the needs of the production, but they are complementary to it. In recent years, trade unions organizations, inspired by our experience, have been joining us from many parts of Europe and from other parts of the world. We have been able to share our know-how both with existing organizations already existing and for the construction of new organization based on our model and our vision. The most recent example was the Spanish one. The leader of Vox, the third Spanish party, that at the polls showed a strong expansion, turned up to us for the constitution of a union whose founding principles were inspired, like the UGL, to overcome the class struggle through the participation of work in the management. This is one of the base principles of the UGL. And the new kind of relationship between capital and labor. This is how the name of the new union is Solidaridad. This is how Solidaridad was born, and our General Secretary, Francesco Paolo Capone, was baptized a few weeks ago in Madrid. Our vision of Europe is that the same like sovereignty force of center-right in Italy, like Lega and Fratelli d'Italia, for instance. We want to change Europe from inside, that is to profoundly change the function of the Union from inside in order to transform it into a European alliance of nations. This is our idea. We focus on the richness of diversity and respect for differences as the cement that binds European nations each other together. We want to defend our cultural values. It was very interesting what I had till now in the speeches of who have been talking so far about values. Support these who want to progress by defending freedom, democracy, and human rights. Promote social policy that goes hand in hand with development of economy and well-being and poorest of the poorest and fundamental objectives for us. We believe in a Europe of nation state that allows government and countries to cooperate for the construction of a more global and stable Europe based on diversity. We strongly support subsidiarity, which we believe is an essential principle for equitable distribution of power between the European Union, nation, and local authorities in the best interest of all the citizens. In this regard, we propose the single currency to be at the service of national economies, and we suggest that the governance of the Central Bank of Europe to be reviewed to have as an objective the fight against unemployment and to align the creation of the money with the needs of the real economy. This is very important because we want strongly to promote social market economy, education and research together with the protection of the environment. We are very important subject that has been touched in the speech before. We are against uncontrolled and wild immigration by irregular economic migrants, which are the cause of serious health problems, even more today due to the possibility of spreading the virus, or COVID virus, for the destruction of social rights through the reduction of wages and crime we can see in Italy, which very often is organized crime, which takes the roots in the territory, degrading it. For us, the alternative to European Union is a Europe of nations. Thank you very much indeed. It is a pleasure to be this evening with you. Thank you.
Cocchioni úrnak nagyon szépen.
Thank you to Mr. Cocchioni, and we wish quick recovery to Mr. Faloni. The last weekend of October, the 25th of October, was the day when we commemorated the Székely autonomy, and we celebrated that. And we know that every year the Romanian parliament rejects this initiative, but we stay strong. And the Second National Council also has another agenda. There is an ongoing effort to collect signatures for the recognition of national regions, including Seklerland or Basque Country or Catalonia. And they would like to achieve that they can have direct access to EU funds and that they not have to go through the national routes, because if they have to go to through the national authorities, the danger involves that they do not receive the funding, and that will result in their lagging behind other regions of the country. So I would like to invite Mr. Balázs Izsák, President of the Székely National Council, to give his presentation. Good evening. Thank you very much for the possibility. As a representative of a European civil initiative, I will talk about civil initiatives and the civil initiative, which already shows what our vision is, what our idea is for the future of Europe. This civil initiative was recorded in 2019. The title of it is Cohesion Policy for the Equality of Regions and for the Sustainability of Regional Cultures. So it refers and is related to cohesion policy. It was a long fight to start this initiative and to be able to start a collection of signatures, because the European Commission in 2013 refused to register this initiative. At that time, we opposed this rejection at the Court of the European Union. And so this took place at the end of September 2013. And that is when the 6-year legal struggle started, which in the end led to 7th March 2019, when we were able to end this struggle. I believe it is important to mention this legal struggle because registering a civil initiative requires making a decision, namely whether the issue that is being discussed, whether that issue is the competence of the European Union or not. Apparently, or obviously, this should be a very simple question to answer. However, we received a cumbersome rejection, and it took us 6 years to conduct a dispute throughout which 600 pages of procedures were produced, including arguments and counter-arguments from the Commission, from countries intervening, because in addition to the Commission, Romania, Slovakia also intervened, and Hungary was, of course, for us. They also intervened, and for 6 years there was a continuous debate, which should not have taken place at the court, but in the European Parliament or the European Commission. In the end, in March 2019, we won the the second round of the court proceedings and the second instance, and the initiative was registered. We collected signatures for 1 year, and however, as due to the coronavirus, our period for collection was prolonged by 6 months, which will come to an end in 2 days on 7th November. Just a few words on what we would like to achieve with this initiative. We would like to change the cohesion policy of the European Union, and we would like to do so because we have realized that there are cultural islands in Europe. In other words, regions that are different to the majority in terms of language, of culture, of religion. So they are sort of an island with respect to these characteristics. And we believe that if the European Union does not treat these islands with a special priority in its cohesion policy, these regions and the rights of the people living in these regions are being harmed. So just like the treaty on the European Union says that the EU has to treat these island regions with a special attention, we believe that these cultural islands should also be treated with special attention, because the cohesion policy itself cannot be implemented without obstacles in these regions because of these unique characteristics, for example, their language, their culture. Throughout the collection of signatures, we have succeeded to collect more than 1 million signatures. However, we have not been able to meet the geographical requirement because we have to meet a certain limit, a certain threshold in 7 European Union member states. We managed to reach the threshold in 3 countries, in Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. We have 2 days left to meet this threshold in 4 other member states, and the rate at which we are going currently, we have a good chance to meet this requirement in Lithuania. So we have to have 8,250 signatures from 7 member states. In Spain, in Sweden, in Croatia, and in Slovenia, we are also doing well. We do have a chance to meet this threshold within the next 2 days. If I want to summarize this initiative very briefly, then what we want to achieve is to amend cohesion policy without changing the treaties, and we believe that by this we could improve the cohesion policy and we could improve the relationship between the states and the regions with a special view to these unique regions of a national character. I'm sorry, I'm afraid we've lost our speaker. He was joining us on the phone and he's back again. so far, none of the civil initiatives were successful. We have, of course, also taken this into consideration, but at the same time, we believe that the shared effort will bring us together at a higher level, and it will bring these national regions together to step up together to defend our rights and interests and to bring these to the forefront. And this might actually bring a new wave of regional movements, just like there was one in the 70s around Europe. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you to Mr. Balázs. Thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. I can assure you that many of us here in Hungary are keeping our fingers crossed to make sure that you get the necessary number of signatures.
Now, just recently, there was a documentary on Sweden called The First Swedes in Swedish television, and this is about nothing else but the first Swedes were black-skinned, blue-eyed people, and then somehow the Vikings arrived from somewhere, and then a combination of those created Swedish society. Now, the absurdity of this was seen by many, but it is a fact that according to its migration policy, Sweden represents a very liberal view, and as a result, every 10th Swedish inhabitant is of Middle Eastern or African Muslim origin, and we could see some of the results of that just recently. And our next presenter is Mr. Erik Almqvist, who is a journalist joining us from Sweden, and I'm sure he will have something to say about this. So welcome, Mr. Almqvist. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Audience, I am afraid I might not qualify as a Swede according to this documentary. I don't think I have dark enough skin for that. But I'm not gonna talk about migration this time. Today we are discussing 3 issues. We are talking about the extension of the EuCET network into Western Europe, and we're also discussing 2 topics on the political structure of the European Union. And I think there are others here with extensive experience of how to operate within the corridors of the European Union, or how to navigate and survive the swamp, to address it in more Trumpian words. I will leave those topics for others here who know it better. And instead, I will want to focus on the first point, the extension of the network within Western Europe. But I'll allow myself the freedom not to limit the topic to just Western Europe. Instead, I want to elaborate a bit on the prerequisites for not only extending the network, but also the prerequisites for strengthening and utilizing our network, and this in Europe as a whole. And let's first talk a little bit about platforms, because we can plan and structure the best programs and the best strategies the world has ever seen. But without platforms, we won't take home any victories. So what do I mean with platforms? Let's start by looking at the very aims of the EuCET. What is it that we want to achieve? We want to advance the positions of national conservatism within Europe, which means that ultimately we want to work to pave the way for parliamentarian success of national conservative parties and politicians. So what we need to do is to supplement those political parties that share our agenda by setting the stage as well as we can through extra parliamentarian activism. And to achieve this, we need to change the way the electorate, the peoples of Europe, thinks and looks at society. But we also need to change people's self-image, because in order to defend your nation and your civilization, you need to identify with your nation and your civilization. And mainstream media, Hollywood, influencers, social medias, liberal NGOs and tech giants, they do everything to make people not identify with their nation. And they actively undermine European and Western and Christian civilization. So these actors should be seen as our main rivals that we have to defeat. We need to build and consolidate a network of like-minded people and organizations which together can challenge the narratives of the liberal establishment. Conservative medias, especially in Western Europe, could be much better at pushing common narratives and at creating their own news and setting their own agenda. We should also work more to identify which new European voices and influencers already have a positive impact, advancing narratives favoring national conservatism. For example, there are quite a few YouTubers, Instagrammers, Tweeters, etc., who do just this. And can we help elevate them somehow? Can we build stronger platforms for them and maybe unite some of them to step up the game? The left liberal medias and NGOs, they have created Greta Thunberg, but where is our response? We also need to pick up the fight over so-called civil society, because most people using the term refers to left liberal lobby and activist NGOs, often run by George Soros. The few existing, I should mention, conservative NGOs are not only much fewer than the liberals, but also tend to be much less activistic and much less confrontative. And this is actually significant for modern conservatives, especially in the Western Hemisphere. Politeness, humbleness, and unwillingness to confront, fight, and appear controversial. This is also the key reason to why the liberal left has been able to gain so much ground for several decades now. They don't shy away from fights, and they take every opportunity to advance their positions. I'd like to quote Donald Trump Jr. from an appearance he did in Fox News a couple of weeks ago, asking Republicans to beginning of quote, actually start fighting. Republicans, they sit there and they'll talk a really good game. They'll talk in front of their crowds and they tell them everything they want to hear about conservative values and fighting for them. And then they go down to DC and they fold over and they roll over and die each and every time, end of quote. Trump talks about Republicans, but his criticism can be applied to mostly any Western conservative. Basically, I think the recipe to make EuCET relevant is as simple as it is hard. Confront the international liberal establishment, and when they respond by attacking you, don't roll over and die, don't retreat when they attack you, but rather fight back even harder and advance your positions. And this is actually warfare 101. You don't win a war by constantly retreating from the front line, falling back to the second line of defense, and then the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. But this is exactly the strategy that conservatives in Western Europe have been practicing for a number of decades now. Right now, it looks like we might have a change of office in Washington, perhaps through cheating in the election, but cheating or not, if there is a change, it means that the social medias and the tech giants have won this election. During the election campaign, they have been censoring and filtering what information voters can access in an unprecedented way. And if their candidate, Joe Biden, now wins, we can only expect more censorship and less freedom worldwide, and even harder times for conservatives. So how do we face this threat? We urgently need strong lobbying against every government on our continent. And I'm talking about lobbying for regulations of social medias and tech giants. Since platforms like Facebook and Twitter are de facto monopolies, it is, from a democratic point of view, totally unacceptable that they take it on themselves to decide which opinions and sources will get a good reach, which ideas will get well promoted, and which ideas that will be censored. I think the only order we can accept is that these platforms are not allowed to filter any information flows and are not allowed to censor any opinion that adheres to national law. Our governments need to act on this now, because the longer they wait, the harder it will be to fight back. So how can we here act? I think we have some strategies and tactics to learn from the professionals, networks like Open Society. We need to start producing reports on how the tech giants are undermining democracy. And then we need to target politicians and push for regulations that address these issues raised in our own reports. We also need to identify our friends within media, social medias, influencers, and other NGOs. And we need to coordinate with them all, because coverage, if we are acting in an empty, without this coverage that we can get from friends and friendly medias, we are acting in an empty theater. It is very easy to cozy up to conservative values. But our civilization is at a critical point, and we have to be very clear about it. We have to go to war, not prepare for war, because the left liberals and globalists are already waging it, a cultural and demographic war. And now it is time to mobilize and start fighting back. And as with the previous conferences, this one has already confirmed that we share the same Christian, national, and European values. And I think that we are quite well synchronized on what threats we are facing and what needs to change. I hope that we can soon roll up our sleeves and have meetings on how to start acting and enter the battle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Erik Elmqvist for his very progressive thoughts. I believe that here in Europe, the conservative national governments experience discrimination of the media, as it was mentioned by Mr. Elmqvist. So if we talk about discrimination, then in the Central European region, Hungary and Poland are the two countries which particularly experience this discrimination from the leaders of the European Union. So it's the Article 7 procedures, exclusion from the European Union is used as the sword of Damocles above us, just because we are not willing to accept the migrant-friendly policies that the European Union leaders, Brusselites, want us to adopt. So our last presenter today is Mr. Imre Palkovic, who is the president of the Hungarian Alliance of Workers' Councils. Let me just quote Gábor Bethlen, who was a governor of Transylvania in the Middle Ages. And we have to remember his words. It is not always possible to do what we have to, but we always must do whatever is possible. So, Mr. Laszlo Palkovic, the floor is yours. Imre Palkovic. So let me warmly welcome all the participants. As the president of the National Association or National Federation of Workers' Councils at this very important European Civil Movement Conference, the conference which is trying to describe a European future and starting from the present to make recommendations, observations, which also have a very important interest for the employees. So it's a social dimension of the European Union which affects the workers the most. So one of the basic starting points of the European Union was economic cooperation. And the success of this economic cooperation brought with itself the historic endeavors, achievements, which were seen in the European society. So it's not only the advantages, especially for the investors, but also to bring rules for employees which can ensure the livelihood, the decent work, and the future for people who, which the employees feel that it's worth making sacrifices and it was worth waiting for the years when during communist times we were just looking with interest at the European cultural and living standard differences. And unfortunately, in this integration endeavors, the workers had to be disappointed. The first disappointment was experienced at the time of accession, when we found out that the basic values and all the advantages were only made available after 7 years of waiting. So the free access or lack of free access meant that we had a second-class citizenship state. And it was actually requested by the Western trade unions not to allow the newly joined countries' workers to the labor market. So much about the international labor movement solidarity. But at the same time, the enticing of highly qualified professionals has been going on and is still going on unrelentlessly. So there was not a lot of positive to be said about the mobility or the even after the restrictions were lifted. There was a very serious extraction of qualified workers, which caused labor shortages. Of course, this is a more complicated issue because the very low Eastern European wages also had a significant effect. So there was an ambivalent situation created for the Eastern European workers in relation to the social policy of the EU as well. So as we know, the primary aim in creating the EU was economic cooperation, but during the extension, the citizens of the different member countries paid more attention to the social dimension as well. So in 2017, the white paper on the social issues, the social dimensions, was published. And I have to say that these measures and these aims just seems like measures on the level of appearance. Now, I would list here the situation of employees which are delegated or posted abroad. But you had to be really blind that the real aim was to push out the companies in the Eastern European region from the central countries by making the accepting countries pay only minimum wages. So it was actually aimed at just protecting their own workers. So we have to increase the salaries and wages of these. So it's another trap, the social pillar, which was recently adopted. Now, the story about this is that there should be no difference between the social security, social safety of European citizens. And I think the majority would agree with this initiative. But if we get involved in the issue, and if we just look at the strengthening of the Eastern European economies, and that the governments have to do this instead of strengthening their own economies, then again, the intention is very nice on the surface, but in actual fact, it's the competitiveness of these countries to be constrained, and the social responsibility that the member countries, which were formerly socialist and now under market economy conditions, they will not be able to do that if the social levels are determined according to central quotas instead of the local economic agreements and adjusted to their local possibilities. So the social pillar is ambivalent from the point of view of having important goals, but there is no mandatory provision or legislation. So they often say that there is always a legislative procedure which is launched by the European Union, but the European minimum wages is another issue like this. In relation to this, there is a big dilemma whether we should support this or not, or is this another trap? Is it just simply a union level fooling of the people? Because it's a very noble aim that 10 out of 100 are poor people who are working, and a European minimum wages would be an important tool or an asset. We are not talking about a central model for the establishment of minimum wages in the member countries. Now, in order to have a social acceptance and social support, if we really look deep into this issue, even if it's introduced, then there will not be a higher minimum wage as a result. In Hungary, there have been significant increases of the minimum wages, and the Hungarian government made an agreement in 2016 about a long-term 6-year program, and there was the first stage of 2 years in 2019 and 2020. And based on compromises, there are agreements which take into consideration the burden-bearing capacity of the countries, bringing them into a better position. So I believe that European legislation should include or should be based on labor and other agreements. So the regulation of daily life should be kept at the member country level. Otherwise, they will not be able to meet the expectations that the Western European countries are trying to set. So we have some suspicion that it will stop the dynamic development of the different member countries if it's not the citizens or the stakeholders of the different countries. So these are the dilemmas that we often face in respect of the European Union. Thank you very much, Mr. Palkovic, for these valuable thoughts. Now we have come to the end of the presentation. So now we will have Q&A session. You can make comments, but we only have about 12 minutes. So we'd like to ask anyone who would like to comment to limit it to maximum 2 minutes. So whoever would like to add something or ask something, please raise your hand if you want to make a comment to anything that has been said so far.
Nos?
Is there anyone who would like to comment? If there are no comments, we would like to thank you for your participation online. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. We've learned a lot, and we will summarize these thoughts. These will be also published. And now I would like to ask you to stay with us, and I would like to ask Laszlo Csizmadia to summarize what has been said so far and share his thoughts on our conference. Thank you. Thank you for the possibility to address you once again. I don't want to close this wonderful conference. I would much rather like to urge the participants to continue this important work. And there's one thing to pay attention to, which can only be achieved with a certain level of radicality, and that's namely that these wise words should not remain wise words, but should be also understood by the European Union. The European Union should understand that this is a cry, the cry from the desert, because it appears that those who in some way or another would like to reform the institutional system of the European Union do not really have the possibility to make their voices heard in the European bureaucracy. We believe, and I believe, it is important that we all strive to ensure that the governments of the European Union do take the principle of popular sovereignty seriously. You can have a look at Hungary's example when it is about issues that affect the life of people. The government of Orbán Viktor undertakes to make a national consultation, not to make any favors to the civilians, but to make sure that they go into the right direction and that their governance is not hindered by anything. And as concerns sovereignty and subsidiarity, we can just end the topic by saying that we only want to give up as much of our sovereignty as is acceptable to the nation as allowed by our constitution. But I think the issue of subsidiarity is even more important. Where should the answers come from? Well, the answers should come from the place where the questions about the people, about their lives arise. So I think this is an issue which, if the EU bureaucracy does not acknowledge, they will have to face the willpower of the people eventually. Because what is to be taken away from this conference is that all those who spoke up here today spoke up for the survival of the European Union and are urging for cooperation that takes the interests of the simple citizens of the now 27 member states seriously, and it takes it into consideration. It is not by chance that we say that civil initiatives are not meant for the drawers of the European Commission. They are meant for the European Parliament, to be seen by the European Parliament. And if I'm already talking about the Parliament and the Commissions, I just want to say it would be nice to turn the institutional system upside down so that the feet are back on the ground, because it is very annoying when more than 750 European commissioners are having fun from the money of European taxpayers and are just conducting party politics debates. And instead of becoming a professional organization, and instead of providing professional perspectives for the European Council that can be immediately used at the highest level, the European Commission is now just having fun together with the European Parliament. And it's true, Belgian beer is super good. And yes, you can get a lot of money for positions there. You can get various benefits that the simple taxpayers, European Union citizen taxpayers, not even understand. So they can really have a lot of fun and enjoy leisure time there. But I think that reformers that I hope will increase in their numbers and will step up for the ideas represented by EuCET will strengthen the opposition that was mentioned by our Swedish speaker as well. We hope that we will be able to create more platforms around Europe from where our voice can better reach the ivory tower which was built in Brussels. So the point is that we need much less parliament, we need much less European Commission, we need professional committees, and in general we have national assemblies and we have parliaments to decide locally on issues that also affect the European Union as such. Returning to the founding fathers of the European Union, I want to say that we have to strengthen the primate of the economy. Politics has to be restricted and focused on certain policy areas. And I'm sure there are people who are smarter than civilians, for example, foreign policy, environmental protection, or defense policy. These might be policy areas that could be shared policy areas. And if I've already said that we have to turn things upside down, we have to also acknowledge that it is not by accident that the European Council is put together of heads of state and government, and they are very aware of the fact how long they will be in their positions, namely as long as they can represent the rights and the interests of their citizens. And we have to understand that the European Union is our home. It is our second hope. And we must show that there is no misunderstanding, because we sometimes are being attacked in a religious sort of fight, which can turn into a civil war. And this has to be prevented. When I listened to the contributions of the unions, I was reminded of Prime Minister Viktor Orban's words when he said that we are a plebeian government, which means that there is solidarity. That it means that the minority has to feel just as well in the country, in our country, as the majority. This refers to those who might become rich as an outstanding business performance. But we have to make sure that it is not the foreign companies that are being enriched, but it is our youth and the future generations of our countries. So these are the thoughts with which I would like to close my remarks. I would like to thank you all for your wonderfully wise words. We will use your thoughts and we will ask you to further support our work. I wish you good night and thought-evoking morning. We will continue with our work. This is the point. Nothing about us without us. Thank you, Mr. Chismadia, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the valuable closing remarks. I would also like to thank our participants and our speakers for being with us online in this difficult situation throughout the pandemic. We're very happy that we were able to have this conference As Mr. Chairman has said, we're very happy that these thoughts were now formulated. We would like to ask you and urge you to take these thoughts with you, spread these thoughts. So we always say goodbye with our motto, nothing about us without us. And I would like to just say thanks to Szerencsejáték Limited for their support in organizing this conference. Please do not forget that the presentations of today's conference will be published by the end of the year in an edited format. Thank you for being with us today. See you soon. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.